The story begins with Clara, who has recently discovered that some plants on the edge of the desert are drying up. These plants can be used as an anesthetic, which is why she ventures into the desert to collect samples. Meanwhile, we see a mysterious man digging up a body in the same area. He calls an unknown contact, saying that his work is done, and they need a new pilot. The next day, Clara heads out again to collect more plant samples. By this time, she has traveled quite far but has not found any. Then we meet a girl named Ellie riding a bike. Ellie is the daughter of the mayor of the area. Upon seeing Clara in the deserted valley, Ellie is surprised and wonders what Clara is doing there. Clara explains that she is there to do research. Ellie then explains that she went out to avoid her father finding out that she skipped school. The two quickly form a bond and begin to search for plants together. As they relax, Ellie tells Clara about her life. Her mother passed away, and she lives alone with her father, who rarely has any free time. That is why she enjoys riding here. After some time, Ellie leaves, but Clara stays to search further. Night falls, and Clara suddenly sees a plane fall from the sky and crash. Shocked, she rushes to the crash site. The plane is completely destroyed, but the pilot, Thomas, is still alive. Clara also notices some equipment packages scattered nearby. At first, she considers helping Thomas but quickly realizes that he is likely a smuggler. She decides it is best to leave and gets into her car. Before she can escape, Thomas starts shooting at her, causing her car to break down. Now under Thomas's control, Clara is at his mercy. Clara tries to remain calm, talking and asking him if he knows where he is. When he admits that he does not, Clara offers to guide him, claiming that she knows the way to his destination, though this is a lie to save herself. Thomas agrees, and he forces her to load the packages into the car and ties her hands. Before getting into the car, Clara secretly hides her map to prevent Thomas from knowing the exact route. There is a knife in her car, and she is about to hide it, but before she can, Thomas enters and they drive off together. Meanwhile, the same unknown man, the supplier named George, calls to ask why the plane hasn't arrived. He learns that Thomas left a long time ago and decides to follow him to retrieve his package. While driving, Clara nervously asks Thomas if he will release her once they reach the city. Thomas does not answer, which increases her fear. She promises not to tell anyone, but Thomas remains silent, focusing on something else, which makes Clara even more nervous. During this tense silence, they have an accident, meaning they will have to continue on foot. Thomas tells Clara to fill a foreign bag with packages and insists that they keep moving. Clara tries to convince him, pointing out that it would take days to cross the desert on foot, especially since he is injured. Thomas ignores her and pushes on, but before they can leave, Clara discreetly grabs the knife, hiding it in her sock for safety. On the other side of the desert, George parks his truck and wanders around, hoping to locate the crashed plane and his missing package. Meanwhile, Clara and Thomas walk through the desert all night, their condition deteriorating. Thomas continues to push Clara to move faster, saying they need to get to their destination quickly. An exhausted Clara finally asks if they can stop and rest for a while, as her strength is weakening. Thomas goes to relieve himself, and Clara uses the moment to try to escape, but her plan backfires. Instead of saving herself, it only further enrages Thomas. He retaliates by restraining her even more tightly, tying her hands and forcing her to carry a heavy bag on her back. Meanwhile, we see Sheriff Alex, Ellie's father, who has learned from the news that a half-eaten body has been found in the desert, likely uncovered by animals. While investigating, he crosses paths with Ellie, who is supposed to be on her way to school, but is not wearing a helmet. He scolds her, but she barely responds, highlighting their distant relationship. At that moment, Alex receives a call from Clara's hostel, informing him that she has not returned for 2 days. Upon hearing this, Ellie interrupts, saying that she recently met Clara, and insists that they find her quickly, describing Clara as a very nice girl. Alex and Ellie go to Clara's hostel, but she is not there, raising concerns for her safety. Alex sends Ellie to school, not wanting her in such a dangerous area. Elsewhere, George, the supplier, finally arrives at the crashed plane. He finds the packages and some bullet casings, confirming that something serious has happened here, and that Thomas is likely still alive. Determined, George follows the crash site, eventually stumbling upon a car with all 4 doors open, accompanied by 2 other men nearby. George lies, asking them if they have seen anyone else. The men mention calling the police, which George does not like, so he kills them and drives off, his only goal being to recover the valuable packages by any means necessary. Meanwhile, Thomas struggles, his injured leg becoming infected, making it difficult for him to walk. Clara suggests they stop to rest, but Thomas is too scared of George, knowing he will come after them. Clara explains that if they continue to walk in the harsh sun, his infection and fatigue will only get worse, making survival impossible. Convinced by her reasoning, Thomas reluctantly agrees, and they find shelter in some shade. Clara takes the opportunity to ask him how his plane crashed. Thomas explains that the plane was old, its engine shut off in flight, and that he is flying at a low altitude to avoid detection by radar. The scene shifts to Alex, who has now located Clara's abandoned car. Nearby, he discovers the bodies of the 2 men George killed, confirming that something important is happening. As he returns to the station, he notices tire marks likely left by George's car, and begins to pursue them. Alex eventually finds George's car parked near a hill and begins to examine it. Suddenly, George ambushes Alex, opening fire on him. During the scuffle, Alex's name tag falls to the ground, and he slips and falls into a ravine. George assumes Alex is dead, and to ensure he cannot communicate or get help, he destroys Alex's radio and sabotages his truck. Clara and Thomas have been trudging along for hours, finally reaching the foot of a mountain. Thomas insists that they need to climb it to reach the other side as soon as possible, but Clara, exhausted, suggests that they rest for the night and deal with it in the morning. With time running out and his condition worsening, Thomas temporarily frees her hands to allow her to help him. Despite Thomas's life hanging by a thread, Clara chooses to help him, and together they reach the top of the mountain by dawn. Meanwhile, Ellie becomes increasingly concerned when her father does not return from his shift. She heads to the police station, only to find it empty as everyone has gone home. Suspecting that her father is following Clara and sensing that something is wrong, she takes her bike and sets off to look for him herself. As darkness falls as Clara and Thomas rest, they realize that they are alone in the desert with no food or water. Despite the days they have spent together, they realize that they do not even know each other's names. During their conversation, Thomas reveals that he is actually a teacher, but had to turn to illegal work to pay for his father's medical treatment. He explains that sometimes people have to make difficult choices. In response, Clara shows him a butterfly tattoo on her hand, saying she got it in memory of her younger sister, who died last year. Clara admits that many people blame her for her sister's death due to mistakes she made in the past, which led her to leave home and wander the desert. This scene serves as a reminder not to judge a book by its cover, as Thomas and Clara both have good hearts but unfortunate circumstances brought them together. Meanwhile, Ellie frantically searches for her father Alex. As night falls, she becomes frightened but soon finds his name tag on the ground. She stands there, screaming at him, and fortunately, Alex hears her voice. They reunite and, with Ellie's help, climbs out of the trench. Alex tells Ellie to go home, explaining that he needs to deal with this on his own, but Ellie doesn't listen. Without telling him, she sneaks away to continue searching for Clara. In the desert, Clara cuts her ropes with a hidden knife and seizes the opportunity to escape while Thomas sleeps. She runs as far as she can, trying to escape before anyone can follow her. However, she soon encounters George, who is immediately suspicious. Although he does not recognize her, he assumes that her presence must be related to the missing packages. Clara begins to flee between high rocks and George pursues her. At that moment, Thomas appears and sees her running. He stands in front of George to protect her, telling her to escape. Thomas tries to convince George, offering him the packages and begging him for his life, explaining that his family is waiting for him. However, George, unmoved, shoots Thomas and takes the bags. Clara has a chance to escape but notices Ellie's bike nearby, realizing that she must be inside the area and in danger. Determined to do so, Clara returns to rescue her. Inside, she finds George holding Ellie captive. Clara tries to free her, but George fires a shot that hits Clara in the stomach and she collapses. In the confusion, Ellie pushes George, causing him to hit his head on a rock. Clara quickly grabs her bike and speeds off, with George chasing her furiously. Alex arrives and begins shooting at George, but George, undeterred, continues to chase after them. Ellie picks up the pace, but Clara loses her balance and falls off the bike. George seizes the opportunity, dousing Ellie with kerosene, intending to set her on fire. Meanwhile, Clara notices the nearby suitcases, sets them on fire, and screams at George. George, seeing his precious cans burning, loses control. Greed gets the better of him, and he jumps into the flames to retrieve them, only to be consumed by the flames. With George gone, Alex arrives, happy to find Ellie safe, and quickly drags her away. Though injured, Clara is still alive. Clara discovers the plant she originally came for, completing her mission. The story ends with a sense of closure, as Clara, Ellie, and Alex escape the desert with a renewed sense of purpose. That's all. I hope you enjoy the story. Thanks for watching.